Shivani Mehrotra, and you are listening to 91.9 Rec Radio. Today's Tech Talk podcast is a special feature of one of our very own student activist groups here on campus, One Voice Atlanta, which advocates against sex trafficking. A relatively new organization, One Voice Atlanta was founded 6 years ago by Brittany Mays, a woman who realized the severity of the issue and the lack of activism against sex trafficking on campus, despite the fact that Atlanta is the #1 hub for sex trafficking. This past week, having the flu or whatnot, I lost my voice. It was indistinguishable from my normal tone, and for a few days I couldn't speak. It was then that I realized how significant this organization's work was and how fitting the name of the organization is, One Voice. These students collectively are the one voice for those who have been exploited and stripped of their own say. The organization strives to promote awareness regarding the issue of sex trafficking in addition to providing relief to victims and promoting education to students in low-income areas susceptible to being the hubs of trafficking and for these children to become traffickers. I went to one of their meetings on Monday and observed these students in action. I watched the One Voice Atlanta members collaborate together in order to advocate their message to the student body. The first project I watched them work on was members posing with serious faces and sex trafficking facts, such as sex trafficking is a $32 billion industry, and there is an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 prostituted children in the United States. They started a Facebook campaign to promote their benefit concert and dinner, Voices by the Numbers, whose profits will be donated to help victims. The organization has also in the past engaged in tabling on Tech Walkway and held symposiums with guest speakers to inform students about the topic. They have also lobbied for Rachel's Law, the first sex trafficking law in Georgia to help the sexually exploited, in addition to having held the National Sex Trafficking Conference here on campus. But how effective are these techniques in promoting the organization's causes? The greatest difficulty this organization faces is the unpleasant nature of the issue of sex trafficking. It is not an everyday topic of conversation, nor is it a comfortable topic either. People try to ignore the issue because of its sensitive nature. No one wishes to believe that while they are in the comfort of their own bed, someone else is being abused, sexually exploited, and deprived of their basic human rights at the very same moment. Hence, the organization makes the effort to raise overall awareness in addition to clearing up misconceptions.
The more people know about it, and know, because when people think human trafficking, they think, girls being held in cages somewhere in Eastern Europe, and that's like a very, very small percentage of what human trafficking is. People who are being trafficked, some are being held captive, but a lot of them are, especially the younger girls, some of them still may be in school, and they may be in our communities, maybe not at Georgia Tech, but you never know, but especially in high schools. And so raising awareness about what the signs are to look for when someone's being trafficked, or is on the brink of becoming trafficked, because most people who are trafficked by someone they know. So whether that's an older boyfriend who really was just hunting to begin with, or in some terrible cases it's family members, aunts, uncles, parents, even foster parents. So being aware for the signs, and then also, it's a supply and demand thing. If more people know about human trafficking, you can put a face to human trafficking, and you can put a face to these girls and boys that are being exploited, then the demand is going to go down as much as, if there's a demand, there's a supply, and if demand goes down, supply will go down. So
another difficulty the organization faces is trying to reach out, really, to male students.
It is a difficult topic to talk about, and particularly, and this is the problem with Georgia Tech being 60% men, it's very difficult to talk to men about human trafficking, in my opinion, in a constructive way, because you have to toe the line of, while you do want to make people feel accountable and make them feel like they should be part of the solution, we don't want to shock people into joining our group. We don't want to guilt people into joining our group. So it's really about having open dialogue and, from a respectful point of view, talking to people on campus and and making them want to join, not out of guilt or, shock value, but because of something that they're actually interested in.
The organization currently only has a few male members, but it is optimistic about spreading awareness of sex trafficking to other males on campus because although it is difficult to rope men into the cause of women's rights, it just takes a share or a retweet to help people realize that the campus organization is trying to make a difference in this pertinent issue. In my interview with board member Nikki Mesmarda, a profound question arose. Overall, does Georgia Tech's campus lack activism?
Well, for me, when I came to college, I knew that activism was something that was really important to me. You always see in these movies, like movies about civil rights era, so much of the change happens with students and on college campuses. So I think that student activists have a lot of power. And as much as there are a million things I love about Georgia Tech, one of the things I don't love so much is people aren't as active, whether that's socially, politically, things like that. But I do think that student activism is extremely important and has the power to make a lot of change. The International Human Trafficking Institute, which is actually based in Atlanta, is a networking group of students because the people who funded that institute are people who are very active, who are obviously now much older, but they were very active in the civil rights era as students. And their opinion is that human trafficking is a civil rights issue of our generation, and they want it to be a student-led movement.
Focusing again on One Voice Atlanta, how exactly does this group make an impact on people and its issue? I would say that it definitely decreases the stigma around sex trafficking, in addition to bringing awareness that this issue exists, especially in Atlanta. But it's not like the organization will stop sex trafficking, and neither will it directly decrease the prevalence of the issue. But it really does stop students from being ignorant about these issues that society faces and presents issues that they can become passionate about and push for legislation or aid, or engage in nonprofits that could directly help victims get out of the sex trafficking industry, or even enable these men or women who have become a product of the dirty trade with an education or information to get them back on their feet and live a life in accordance to their own rights and be their own boss, rather than feel as though they are constantly under the rule of someone else. The organization tries to unravel these invisible systems that contribute to people participating in the sex trafficking business by encouraging low-income students, predominantly African American children, in inner-city schools to engage with their education and presents opportunities of STEM education and emphasizes the importance of learning to discourage involvement in the trade, which I find key. I find that we as Georgia Tech students, however, see ourselves as privileged enough, and having been able to receive a higher education, we are able to advocate against these systems. And interestingly enough, as coined by Peggy McIntosh, it's an invisible system of privilege at the end of the day. Because I live in a safe environment, I can advocate against those who are not in a safe environment. But in reality, unless I have been trafficked myself, I cannot truly empathize with the unimaginable hellish circumstances that many sex trafficked victims go through. This system follows a general pattern observed of the better off fighting for the oppressed. From a different view, one could look at the formation of clubs on campus against these societal problems as a privilege of being a college student, and observing young, privileged college students advocating for the impoverished and suffering who were forced into the trade is another trend that you see in society. Women who are trafficked are statistically of lower income, high-risk communities that lack a focus on education, and although the organization does bring relief to victims, it also highlights the stark divisions within the community. As mentioned by Grace Lee Boggs, our society indeed has become a factory model. The educated become more educated to help the victims of the problems of society, but the actual issue does not have a solution, so it's a never-ending cycle of the damsel in distress problem or model that consists of the educated and elite saving the poor and suffering. but never presenting a full solution to the issue. But looking at a more positive side of campus activist organizations and One Voice Atlanta, these groups are at least bringing awareness to the societal problems, and they do at least make the effort to try and help those who have suffered, despite its inability to provide an overall solution that would permanently solve the problem. One Voice definitely does try to make an impact in the greater Atlanta community and the Georgia Tech community, and brings awareness to the issue of sex trafficking. The more we may know about the problem, the more we will be able to drastically reduce the problem in the hopes of completely eradicating the problem.